Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a comment regarding how the EU is reported to be viewing Boris Johnson's moves to break the Northern Ireland Protocol, along with an analysis of what alternatives he might expect to emerge from it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the first thing to note is that it's my basic belief that this entire row over the Northern Ireland Protocol, as far as Boris Johnson is concerned, because there are other players, is that he promised that the warned about consequences of his extreme Tory Brexit would never transpire. They have transpired, and so he simply intends to wish them away. It is frequently reported by those close to him that the Prime Minister thinks belief solves everything. Any senior officials who ever attack one of his lunatic schemes as unworkable are branded as having insufficient vision and get out of here. He surrounds himself with people who will at least pretend to share in his mindless optimism against all reason. Now, before Brexit happened, people had warned about the consequences of Northern Ireland. Everyone from former Prime Ministers to internet gobshites like me. The only way to prevent any of these negative consequences was for the entire UK to remain in the EU's customs union. This was sort of where Theresa May was going. This was almost immediately trashed as an option by the Conservatives after the Brexit referendum, however, which meant that May's backstop idea ultimately fell down. Even though, of course, it all went against their promises, because they promised that we would never leave the single market. Well, to not be in the customs union means we have to leave the single market. But such is the fate of all their promises. So January this year saw the forewarned consequences of Brexit for trade between Britain and Northern Ireland, amongst others. Specifically trade from Britain to Northern Ireland, because the UK government can do what they like the other way around. If they want to allow anything and anyone in without any checks, just like we're doing between France and Britain, for example, then that's up to them. And there's going to be a bit more about that this weekend as well. But now that the consequences are not only real, but just as severe as was warned, and people are waking up to the fact that it's going to become more severe, not less, as grace periods fall away, Johnson appointed one of his optimistic nutters to take over Brexit, David Frost, who promptly announced plans to unilaterally rewrite the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is part of the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson only 3 months ago was insisting that that's what he meant by the oven-ready deal in the general election campaign of 2019. So I've talked a couple of times about how I'm seeing this. How are the EU seeing it though? Because that's more relevant. They are key influential players in this drama. Now, according to reports, they seem to think that what's going on here is Boris Johnson and David Frost are wanting to declare that the protocol just isn't going to work and it has to be negotiated or dropped. In addition, the DUP, being the major force in Stormont, only lend themselves to this unilateral action. And although I think that Johnson genuinely fears international reprisals, I'm not so sure that the DUP do. I think that they are genuinely insane. And another thing that the reporter who threw into the mix was the accurate belief from UK officials that the EU never wanted Brexit to succeed. Now let's think about that statement. UK officials are saying, well, the EU never wanted Brexit to work, did they? Duh. Of course not. Let us consider what Brexit fundamentally is. I don't just mean the dogma of individual forms of possible Brexit. Brexit at its very core, in any form, was ultimately the concept that the UK could leave the EU and do at least as well outside the bloc, or even better. I mean, if that happened, then what's to keep other countries in the EU? The EU is no different to any other organisation. Doesn't matter whether it's a country, an international trading bloc, or even a tennis club. It acts in its own interests and challenges robustly anything that attacks its own interests. That is not a stick to beat the EU with. It is a stick to beat Brexiteers with. They chose to become opponents of the EU. And there's no point in Brexiteers whining about the EU doing this or that or the other, because they're the ones who said we hold all the cards. We're the ones who said we don't. They said we did. If they are whining about things that the EU are doing, they are basically saying that the EU hold at least some of the cards. In fact, the particular brand of aggression and rudeness that those people pursued on our behalf to bring in the specific form of Brexit path that we took is that we didn't just choose to become their opponents, we chose to become their enemies. That's how it's all phrased. Of course it is in the EU's interest for the UK to do badly from Brexit. They are pragmatic, they don't cut off their nose to spite their face, they don't want us melting down or anything, they don't want us disappearing under the waves. We're still a large market on their doorstep. It does them no good at all for us to sink completely. But it is absolutely in the EU's interest for Brexit to be a complete shit show. No argument about that on either side. However, it's not like the EU have to put a lot of effort into making this happen. Unlike the Brexiteer government, who are desperately pulling every dirty trick in the book to avoid Brexit being a complete nightmare. All the EU have to do is the reverse. They just have to make sure that they don't do us any unnecessary favours. They've done us a few favours, but that's largely been in their interests anyway. Don't do us any unnecessary favours, that's all they need to do. All perfectly legal and above board. Take the trade and cooperation agreement that we agreed in December, but the EU still have not ratified. Boris Johnson sacrificed everything for a deal that allows him to lower standards in the UK compared to the EU. The EU, on the other hand, made sure that they prioritised mechanisms that could be applied should the UK try to unfairly undercut EU businesses. They didn't want a mechanism that would mean years of legal wrangling while the UK undercut them. They wanted to make sure they had the ability to apply with not negotiation so much, with full transparency, but nonetheless unilaterally apply measures. In other words, the EU have levers to make Brexit more or less comfortable for the UK depending on how we behave. Boris Johnson put a shock collar on the UK and gave the controls to the EU. And they have the stomach to use them. For all the talk of the EU taking legal action against the UK, which is not an insignificant event, but I don't know how long that would take or what effects that would have, there are other things that they can apply unilaterally. For example, our financial services sector is currently sweating over the EU's equivalence decisions. Our largest sector, and Johnson won nothing at all for them, not a thing. The EU were already planning on largely cutting the UK out of their financial markets, but they can go further, and there will be a double pressure for them to do so. Obviously, declining equivalence in any area that they might have been willing to grant it in can be used as a button on that shock collar remote, a punishment for poor behaviour. But for every refusal of equivalence in the several dozen areas where it might apply, that means jobs moving from Britain to the EU. There are numerous influential EU member states who would not at all be disappointed to see more jobs moving from London to their financial centres. But the EU also understand what the issue at stake is for Johnson and his government. He sold the sovereignty lie. He also framed sovereignty as the idea that you get to call the shots and don't follow anyone else's rules. But this is why Brexit is so messy, because Brexit actually means following rules that you don't make. EU rules before 2020, and this is how it worked on some people in this country. People were convinced that there was the UK and there was the EU, two separate entities. But that wasn't the case. We were the EU. We were part of the EU. We decided those rules. So EU rules before 2020 were at least influenced by the UK. Many EU rules could not have been implemented without UK support. And in fact, quite a lot of rules that we didn't support didn't get through. This is why there is only a very small percentage, like 2 or 3% of EU rules that were opposed or at the very least unsupported by the UK. Now it's different. Now the EU are making rules that the UK has no say in whatsoever. So those rules have been formulated without our interests at heart. Nothing at all we can do about it, much less have a veto on anything big and impactful like new trading arrangements with other countries, for example. But we will still have to follow those rules because the world dances to the tune of the biggest players. That is the EU and the US as far as we are concerned. Speaking of the US, it will come as no surprise that Biden's government are looking our way with some concern, not at all sympathetic with the pickle that Johnson finds himself in due to his own dishonesty. But I saw something interesting about that, so that may also crop up this weekend. But Johnson is in a pickle. The Northern Ireland Protocol is a way, ultimately, of complying with EU need to protect their single market, whilst at the same time preserving the Good Friday Agreement. That's what it is. That's the unvarnished truth. It is a slap in the face of the sovereignty argument because ultimately the Northern Ireland Protocol exists for the EU and for Ireland, not for Britain. This is why Johnson wants to sink the protocol. But what to do about it? He can't just cancel it because that would create a definite breach of the Good Friday Agreement. This would earn international condemnation. We know he won't actually want to walk down that path, or at least he won't want to run down it. He sort of pretends he's going to start on it and then goes back. He cannot afford to make both the EU and the US his enemies. And this is what such a policy would do. He and his Brexiteers would have nowhere to go. I also don't believe he can just tough it out until the next US presidential election, hoping that Trump or someone else like that gets in. And also, we have to bear in mind, even when Trump was president, it was made very, very clear to us that he wouldn't support that move either. So anyway, that leaves renegotiating. Can't just drop it, he wants to renegotiate. Now, the EU don't need to renegotiate an agreement that they're happy with. So how do you get them to change their mind? You can't force them to change their mind. How do you encourage them? Well, what they're obviously thinking is make such a colossal mess of things, behave so badly that it just seems easier to give in than to stand your ground. However, this is like giving the screaming child that bar of chocolate. That doesn't work out well in the long run. The EU are unlikely to be that naive. Besides, what if they did agree to negotiate? What then? What would Johnson try to change that meant he got his precious sovereignty without battering the Good Friday Agreement? I put a response to someone on Twitter. So Twitter was saying what we should do is we just need to apply common sense. I had to point out, isn't British common sense what killed 120,000 of us recently? I think we might need something a bit more concrete there. What are they going to do that means he keeps his precious sovereignty without harming the Good Friday Agreement? There isn't anything. Because if there were, he would have done that in the original negotiations. We had years to work on this problem. You're not going to tell me that the finest legal minds, and never mind the stupidity of our politicians, they had some fine legal minds on this. The finest legal minds of the UK, of the EU, could not come up with something better than what we have now. How are we going to suddenly come up with it now? Nothing that is happening now is unexpected. None of it is unintended consequences. So this is the sort of thing that has been in the planning for years. If there was a better way for everyone to get what they wanted, it would have been done. But there isn't, because Brexit is fundamentally about contradictory things. And the thing is, when you try and implement two mutually exclusive things, a maximum of one of them can actually be implemented. It's possible neither can, but a maximum of one can. So the reality is that while Johnson persists with this course of action, the EU are likely to hurt the UK into submission, knowing full well that they enjoy international support for doing so. We wanted them to be our enemies, remember? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.